Unit 5 of APES starts to move us from sort of some general scientific principles of ecology and earth science that we studied in Units 1 through 4, and starts to move us towards more human uses and applications. And so this unit is about how humans use the land and water resources on Earth. And what we'll talk about is various general concepts related to resource use. We'll talk about sustainability, and we'll also then start to talk about what are some ways that humans use land and water resources, what are some potential pitfalls, and what are some possible ways to reduce those negative consequences. And so we're taking the topics out of order actually in this unit, and so I've organized them sort of with an issue or use of land or water paired up within the next topic, how to make those uses more sustainable. We'll start off in topic 1.1 with a concept that's called the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is a concept in which people have talked about since antiquity. Aristotle talked about the tragedy of the commons. More recently, this concept was really brought to the forefront by a man named Hardin, who was an ecologist, and he published a work in 1968 in the journal Science, one of the most prominent scientific journals. And this is an article that is cited over 58,000 times by other scientists since then. It is an article, a journal article that you'll likely read if you study environmental science or environmental studies or lots of different topics, maybe even biology. And the concept of the tragedy of the commons, as explained by Hardin, was that basically any shared resource will tend to be used for individuals' own self-interest, causing these common resources to become polluted or depleted in some way. And an example of this, if you imagine a pasture, and so here we have a pasture, we have some grazing sheep on that pasture. If this, in Hardin's formulation of this, is that if this patch of grass is open to everyone, there are no rules, regulations, there's no private property. If this is truly a common resource, then humans will graze on this pasture, and for their own selfish economic interest, they will tend to graze more and more sheep on this land, pushing it beyond its carrying capacity, and that common area will be degraded. If an individual decided to act sort of in the greater good and not graze their sheep there, just another individual would likely graze their sheep even more. And so this concept is the tragedy of the commons, that the cost of this depletion of the resource is going to be bared by all of the users because individuals are acting selfishly. And so Hardin's idea, Hardin was really interested in overpopulation. And he actually, his work is pretty problematic when you look at it, and a lot of people since have critiqued it for being racist. And you can read the full article, it's in your workbook. But Hardin was arguing, he was focused on overpopulation. He was arguing that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which one of the principles was that individuals had a right to choose how many children they wished to have. Hardin thought that was inappropriate because humans would tend to just overpopulate the world, leading to depletion of resources. Hardin said that in order to deal with the tragedy of commons, then either privatization of that land was necessary, dividing it up into smaller units so that an individual had ownership of a certain parcel and therefore would not deplete it because it's no longer a common resource, or government regulation or intervention in some way was necessary in order to prevent the tragedy of the commons. Otherwise, Hardin felt that it was inevitable that humans would exploit this resource beyond its ability to be sustainable. But there are a lot of critiques about this idea of the tragedy of the commons. And another different model is from a woman named Eleanor Ostrom. She was working around the same time as Hardin was, but her model was different. Eleanor Ostrom's model looked at various examples of common resources that humans have used and actually managed to use in a sustainable manner without depleting that. And it didn't require privatization or government rule and regulation. Okay? And so Ostrom's principles about how to manage a common resource are listed here. There were 8 of them. She won a Nobel Prize for this. And you can see that if these principles were present, strong group identity, a fair distribution of the cost and benefits, inclusive decision making, monitoring the behaviors of individuals, sanctioning misbehaviors, resolving conflicts quickly, all of those principles would lead to a resource being managed sustainably. And Ostrom actually did field research. She actually looked at examples, whereas Hardin was sort of just a theoretical concept of the tragedy of the commons. This quote sort of explains a little bit more that Eleanor Ostrom found examples of native people managing a common resource without overexploitation. And so I also have in your workbook several articles critiquing the tragedy of the commons by Hardin and also explaining in some more detail Ostrom's principles for how these common pool resources can be managed.